Are you searching for the best in online black radio? Then go to blacktalkradionetwork.com, helping you filter through the noise. Real talk, black talk.
The internet is full of half-truths and all-out lies. We've all seen them, and many people on social media complaining about it. Here's your chance to show and prove. Worldafropedia.com is a black-owned and operated encyclopedia. There are several thousand articles, but we need help. We can't uncover all the truth ourselves. So please, join us and become a writer, editor, or blogger for Worldafropedia.com today. Every little bit counts. We owe it to the future generations to put the truth out there. Visit Worldafropedia.com, the African-centered encyclopedia, a global database of African knowledge for the purpose of bringing about global African wisdom and understanding. Worldafropedia.com.
Hi, Rosemary. Fear and anger, yet unity permeate U of Penn's class of 2020. Now, as we look out here on the campus, as folks are beginning to wake up and get out and about this morning, we have learned from the university president that she received a call from Oklahoma University's president, David Boren, last night involving the Facebook page of a student. The statement says, in part, there's a basis for temporarily suspending one of the students as they investigate his involvement in this matter. This is the matter. Racist texts surfacing on the cell phones of 161 freshmen. Take a look at part of one message. The messages students showed us appeared to be from a group identifying itself as Trump's disciples. We've learned the racial epithets and photographs showed African Americans hanging from trees by nooses. We also saw a reference to Daddy Trump. The president-elect graduated from Penn, as did some of his children. The recipients of the GroupMe social media app messages had not downloaded the app, but they also received a form of an invitation to daily lynching. Moments ago, we spoke to Chad Lassiter of Black Men at Penn.
This is deeply rooted in the fabric of where our country is as it relates to white supremacy, white male dominance, and white privilege that negates black humanity.
The U Penn College Republicans posted a message that reads in part, "These messages are absolutely despicable. Hate such as this has no place on Penn's campus or in our nation." In the next half hour, we're going to have advice for the students who are reeling after these hate-filled messages surfaced, and we're also going to show you an online petition now being circulated by Penn alumni. Live now on the campus of U of Penn, Monique Braxton, NBC 10 News.
Context of White Supremacy. Gus T Renegade in for another broadcast, hopefully to share constructive information on the system of white supremacy. Today's date, Monday, November 14th, 2016. So I have been told, before we get started with our subject for today's broadcast and our guest, I consistently talk about the significance, importance of black journalists, long history, Mumia Abu-Jamal, Ida B. Wells, Barnett, so many others who have contributed down through the years, and hopefully the cows, part of that legacy in some small way. But George Curry died earlier this year, and then today he worked with Emerge magazine and did a lot in terms of helping another generation of black journalists. But he died earlier this year, and then today Gwen Ifill passed away. Long, like decades worth of time, both as a print journalist, a broadcast journalist. She more recently, it's been a lot of time at PBS, but she passed away today, I believe at the age of 61. Just wanted to recognize her loss. Definitely our condolences to her family. Just underscore again the monumental importance of black journalists like the late Gwen Ifill. Context of white supremacy. Our broadcast for today, you heard the segment at the beginning of the program, the incident where young black scholars at the University of Pennsylvania, where they were being racially terrorized, and they found out that this was some students who weren't even in the state of Pennsylvania. They were down in Oklahoma. Incidentally, when I saw this story, I said, wow, I thought everybody at the University of Oklahoma had learned their lesson, right? Remember the whole SAE conflict from last year where they got caught recorded singing We'll Hang a Nigger by a Tree. They'll never have a nigger member of SAE. I thought, they hugged and, did their whole apology routine and everything and said, we're going to take Black history and we'll never have any more problems like this. But that's where they said these white supremacist text messages were originating from. And I thought that was a nice union of a lot of the themes that I want to discuss in today's program. Certainly the reverberations from last week's presidential election and Donald Trump's success, that is still being dissected and discussed. That in conjunction with racial battle fatigue. If folks who have a good memory, last month we had Dr. Tommy J. Curry on the program. He's one of our favorite guests. I don't even remember how many times he's been on the program at this point, numerous times. But we discussed a report that he co-authored, and it talked specifically about the stress that black male students on historically white campuses encounter with black misandry and just generally an entire experience of being surveilled, harassed, mistreated, not thought of as a scholar. Maybe you're an athlete or something of that nature, but certainly you do not belong here. Based on academic merit. But we talked to him and he pointed out very politely, he said, hey, I am a co-author, but I'm about the fourth listed author. The top author who you should have on the program, he's the lead researcher on this particular report. Great research. You should have him on the program. I reached out to him and he was willing to speak with us. He is an associate professor of ethnic studies and education, culture and society at the University of Utah. We will discuss his concept of racial battle fatigue, and we will address the report that he co-authored with Dr. Curry as well as some of his other research. Real pleasure to have him on the program. Joining us live this evening, Dr. William Smith. Dr. Smith, are you with us, sir?
How are you doing this evening?
Oh, I'm so glad we could have you on the program with us. Excited you could share some of your time with us. How are you, sir?
Well, I'm doing well, and it was great to come in and hear Dr. Cress Welsing, a sister from Chicago like myself, and also a Pisces, so it's always good to hear her voice.
Absolutely. I concur and started with that actually I was just playing that. I was on early, so I try to play something just so folks know that we are rolling, broadcasting, and just getting ready for our live start time. But I have a direct question to ask about her. Good to know from the Chicago area like Dr. Welsing. For our listeners, I'm sure we have folks, this might be their first time hearing from you. Anything that you think listeners should know about who you are and the work you do?
Well, I'm from Chicago, like I said. I've been here in Utah for the last 18 years. Prior to that, I've worked at several universities in the state of Illinois. My work is on racial battle fatigue, looking at the psychological, physiological, emotional behavioral responses to deal with racism. And obviously, as you know, that's what black people have been dealing with for all of their lives in this country. So there's a lot of racial battle fatigue out there that we need to talk about.
For sure. For folks who haven't seen you, you are a black male. Is that correct?
I definitely am.
Right on. This program, I generally, with all of our guests, start definition for racism. I take the term racism as well as the term white supremacy. I use them as synonyms, and I use the same definition for both terms. The definition I use is as follows: a global system of people who classify themselves as white and are dedicated to abusing and or subjugating everyone in the known universe whom they classify as not white. Do you think such a system exists? Do you think that definition is accurate?
I could work with that definition. I'm writing it down as you were speaking, and I think it is a useful place to start to analyze our relationship in global white supremacy, the impact that has had on people of color, but more specifically, African people.
What definition do you use for the term racism?
Well, my definition is very similar. I look at it as a global system that tries to destroy the culture, the life, religion, spirituality of African people, and it impacts them on an economic, spiritual, and community basis.
So, community basis. Okay. Black people. Okay. I wrote that down. I think the only difference might be you're saying black people specifically. I think I said non-white people. Is this something that you think is only impacting?
No, I think it's all people of color, but my work primarily focuses on black people. Okay.
Right on. Grant, we will get more into your work. I guess before we get to that, just touch on the presidential election quickly. Your assessment, it's been almost a week now, so everybody has had time to reflect and absorb. What are your thoughts? Were you surprised that he was elected? And what are your thoughts 1 week from the conclusion of everything?
Well, I think we should have seen this coming. And I believe all of the signs were there. And if it wasn't Donald Trump who would have been elected president, spewing the type of hatred and venom that he spewed, it would have been someone soon thereafter. So I was not surprised. I actually wrote I wrote a piece in about 1998 that kind of predicted something like this. It didn't say that Donald Trump would be the person, but the fact that white racial animus, white nationalism was on the rise. If you looked carefully, you saw all the measures for it, and you could predict that. So I'm not surprised, not 1 cent.
Fascinating. Since Dr. Welsing was already mentioned, one of the things I've been doing, since it seems that so many people have been saying that they were stunned, surprised, even if not so much for the explicitly racist nature of Donald Trump's campaign in many people's estimation, but just someone like him with no real political experience and the kind of uncouth and vulgar nature of his presentation over the last 18 months, or even predating that, back when he was accusing President Obama of being a Kenyan and that sort of thing. Dr. Welsing, not only did she predict, she was very specific. She predicted about a month before she passed, she predicted that Donald Trump was going to be president. This is before the primaries, confidently predicted that he was going to be president based on her understanding of racism. And she did so at her institute in D.C. at Howard University. Even a few people kind of snickered a little bit because nobody was really taking him seriously. Given that it's been almost a year since her death, what do you make of her being so, I guess, clairvoyant to understand that she was stating kind of what was happening?
Well, I don't know many people who are spot on the issues of racism as Dr. Gus Welsing is and was. So, no, I'm not surprised that she was able to predict that. She said a lot of things that people found uncomfortable when she first talked about it. In her theory that she presented, what has it been, almost 20 years now? People did not consider that as something that they wanted to hear. But as we look back on history, as we look at where we are today, as we predict what now will happen in the future, I think Dr. Gus Welsing's words are very resonant in our thoughts and how she presented that information. I remember sitting by her side at a lecture one time and just being blown away by what she had to offer. And you would hope that some of the points that she raised weren't going to come true, but I feel that, I'm not surprised that she was clairvoyant, that she was able to read the attitudes of whites in this country and predict that something like this would happen.
Kind of at the center of her analysis of why she thought Trump would succeed President Obama was also the center of her theory of white supremacy racism, which was white genetic annihilation, that individuals who classify themselves as white are a tiny minority of the global population, and that's what motivates them to practice racism. Do you think that's logical? Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, I believe it's that, and I think it's even more than that. I think part of it is wrapped up in what she talks about in this power move. If you talk about original gangsters, this is gangsterism at its best, right? So part of what I heard in the clip that you were playing is this third reconstruction that she talked about. Now, in the second reconstruction, if I'm not mistaken, you had black officials coming, or during that period of time, you had blacks who were elected to office in great numbers. But what happened right after that, so that was between like 1870 and 1901, you started seeing blacks come into office. But right after that, that's when they would disappear. You had the Reconstructive period, Jim Crow coming in. And what I think with this third Reconstruction, if she was still here to talk about it, is that you will see the erasure of President Barack Obama's legacy. If there's anything that you can cling on, that you say, this is what we appreciated about Barack Obama as the president, I think much of that will be removed from our history. Not that it won't be in textbooks and things like that, but what Donald Trump and what white nationalism will do is try to make sure that there is no more hope in the eyes of black children and other children of color that they can ever reach the mantle of being in the office of president of the United States again. So that's part of this third Reconstruction, as it was in the previous Reconstruction, of eliminating those gains that were made during those previous periods.
When you use the term white nationalism, what do you mean?
Well, white nationalism is just a modern-day use for white supremacy and white racists. They've kind of cleaned it up to say, well, we're just a nationalistic move, that we want to have respect for whiteness and white people. But what we know that it is as institutionalized racists, whites who believe in the subjugation of people of color, and particularly black people. So all those things that we see in the data that I said predicted Donald Trump's election, we also see it being played out on these college campuses. So he might have talked about building a wall. He might have talked about anti-LGBT type of issues, anti-Muslim. But one of the things that we see that's played out the most is this anti-black sentiment. So that's one of the number one predictors of those people who supported Trump. So it's a positive correlation with those who feel like they're that black people are making too many gains, they're going too far, and feel that those movements should be repealed, also supported Donald Trump in significant numbers. So there's this anti-black sentiment that's really at the forefront of racial animus. And we see that on college campuses, we see that out in the larger society, and now it's being followed by this anti-immigrant sentiment, but it's not as much as it is an anti-black one. It's very significant. Both are traumatic and are severe in major numbers, but we still see anti-black leading in these incidents on college campuses and also out in the larger society.
Many people have pointed to the protests that have happened across the country. I'm in Washington State. They've been protesting in Seattle quite a bit over the past week or so. Right down the road in Portland, they've been protesting as well. It's been widespread across the country. Some people have interpreted this because it's been a lot of white people out at these events protesting and what have you, looting, as they say. Some people have interpreted this as a civil war, as some sort of major conflict between white people, where you have one side of white people that are saying, hey, we want to have Donald Trump, we want to have racism, we want to have it be upfront, we're tired of political correctness, we want to just be upfront about how we feel about being white and dominating the world, and Donald Trump will help us do that. White nationalist politics goes mainstream, you might say. Where the other faction is saying, well, wait a minute, we don't want to do that. We would prefer to have what they call a more liberal brand of racism, where we have non-white people like President Obama and others, where they have, major positions. It looks like that we don't have racism, that diversity is valued and all the catchphrases, but you still have the same thing. It just doesn't look quite the same, and nobody is calling you a nigger. Everyone is being very nice. You will be invited to, conventions and that sort of thing, but it's still, in terms of day-to-day operations, going to be the same type of thing, that it's a major dispute between whites about how things are going to be operated with Trump being in the White House. Do you think that makes sense, or do you have a different view?
All right. Well, I think both of those populations exist, and I think there's also a third one, and it might be a minority population of whites, but it still exists, and that's one who are fighters for social justice. So I think all three of those populations can live on the same block. So the first two look like each other but have different kinds of orientations on how they act and carry out those ideologies. And then you have this third one that might be smaller in numbers but could be growing because they don't like the way the country is now looking, and especially since Trump has kind of peeled those layers of the onion off to make it okay to be vocal, to make it okay to say things about certain people because you don't like them because of X, Y, or Z. But all three of those groups can exist at the same time.
I guess two quick questions. I guess number one, the first would be, do you think it's logical, just given that Trump was elected and that the majority of whites, male and female, voted for Trump? Do you think it's logical to suspect that some of these people, both before the election and now, that some of these white people that are out, jumping up and down and saying that they hate Trump and he's not their president, that some of them are lying to give the impression that they are not racist and are not Trump supporters?
Oh, well, we saw that happen in all the polling, right? Where people were saying one thing and then go into a booth and did something else. We saw that here in Utah. It was supposed to be that the moral fabric of Utahns would reject somebody like a Donald Trump, and that they would vote for this third-party candidate, if not switch over and vote for Clinton. But that did not happen. We saw in numbers that exceeded 40% voting for Donald Trump. So there were a lot of people who said one thing and did the other. And it's the same thing that Derek Bell talked about in Space Traders. You don't know what people will do in the privacy of their own home or in a voting booth.
Absolutely. I guess with the other, because you said there could be a third population of a smaller population, you did say a minority of whites, but a smaller group of whites who are kind of fed up with all of this, and they are about social justice and fighting against racism. Do you know any people that qualify for being in this group?
I do, but again, it's a small number of people, but they do exist. My attention is on a bigger group, and that group is black folks. And my focus is to assist black people in organizing, being part of an organization that will help with the liberation of black people, whether it's psychologically, economically, emotionally, whatever they need to be liberated from, we need to organize. We have to take the best that we had from the 60s and the 70s and the Black Power movements and other movements, and we have to bring that into contemporary form. Places like my hometown of Chicago, they have been doing it, and it's been going on all along. Some of it's underground, some of it's above ground. But all throughout this country, black folks have to turn to each other. So for those reasons, I am less concerned about Donald Trump being president of the U.S. I believe that in a weird kind of way, it might prove to be the best thing for black people if we can turn to self and do for self and emancipate self and to organize and to teach our babies to have Saturday schools that's based on appropriate, cultural, relevant education for our children, to have these organizations that also are part of what our young people need, to show and set an example for young black folks, but also a place for older black folks to share their wisdom. That's what we need. And we should not be dependent upon the Democratic Party as if they're our savior. We shouldn't be dependent upon a third party, an independent party. We should not allow our votes to be taken for granted any longer, that you can just come into our communities, kiss a couple of black babies, do a couple of photo ops. Don't give us any policy arguments, and then you just think we're going to show up and vote for you. We can't allow that to happen anymore. And I do believe that that's what occurred with this election and the previous elections.
Context of white supremacy. Dr. William Smith. Before we get to racial battle fatigue, I did just want to go back to this small third minority group. What exactly would a white person have to do? Because you said you know, like personally, some of these white individuals. What would a white person have to do to qualify to be in this group as a social justice advocate? Like what individual or what specific things have they done to kind of evidence their commitment? And is it possible that they could still practice racism even after they've done all of these acts?
Well, the second question is the easier one, and I'll answer that first, and it's yes. And I could leave it there, but it's hard to be in this society and not be influenced by white supremacy, period. All people suffer under that system. And so definitely if all people suffer, then white people suffer in significant ways. And so they would have to practice a kind of social justice type of ideology on a day-to-day basis, which means that they're going to have to check themselves. They're going to have to look at that person in the mirror and say, all right, here's what I did wrong today. Here's what I need to improve upon today. They're going to have to really do a critical analysis of what they do, how they do, where they spend their money, all the things that black people have been racially socialized to do. Where if they go to a house of worship, what are they preaching in that place? In black churches, they talk about racism. It's interwoven into many of the sermons. What is talked about in your place of worship? So they're going to have to be very, very critical of almost everything they do, how they raise their children, what kind of schools they go to, how they're being indoctrinated. So, it's a hard practice, and that's why many of them can't succeed in it or they give up because it's so hard. It's easy to go back to the way things were. But those who persist, they can see some growth, some development, and they need to fight white supremacy as hard as or harder than folks of color.
That is interesting. Wow. Okay.
Now, again, I can't hang my hat on what white people do.
Mm-hmm.
I'm worried about what black people do and how we do it. So, and that's what I'm saying. We have to, we can't look at the Democratic Party or any political party as our saviors. So black people have to turn to self. And I'm not suggesting that we have not done that, but we have to do it more feverishly now.
Definitely.
Because there's no excuse, right? There's no excuse. All these things that are going on. Trump only, even if he pulls back from his rhetoric, he basically gave the okay for what many people were thinking or feeling, and so that they can now voice or act upon those hidden thoughts. Some were already out there just doing it, but now it seems like in growing numbers, people are feeling okay with what they can do to other people and get away with it. We've been complaining about that all along as people of color. We've been saying, hey, this is the racial climate at my work. Here's the racial climate in my neighborhood. This is the racial climate at my college or university. It was other people who did not, and primarily when I say other people, it was mainly white people who said, well, it's all in your head, or it's not as bad as you think it is. So they're telling the person who's being victimized that the victimization isn't as bad as they think it is. That's ridiculous.
I agree 1,000,000%. Just the one tidbit I did want to get in before I kind of switch gears to the racial battle fatigue. When you were beginning your response, which was logical in terms of black people just looking to make changes ourselves and work with each other to try to solve this problem, not looking to white people to help out or come in and be saviors for us. But when you were saying that just to be a white person, you're going to be conditioned to support, practice white supremacy, racism. You said to kind of be in the society that everyone suffers from white supremacy. And that's something I hear that regularly talked about, that somehow white people are harmed by white supremacy, or white people are violated or suffering or victims of white supremacy. And I tell our audience all the time to reject that notion of thinking about racism in that manner, because I think consistently whites, we oversympathize with them, and we just don't look at this as a crime. When I hear people talk about any other crime, if we're talking about terrorism or rape, nobody empathizes with the perpetrator and says that they suffered somehow and that their humanity was compromised in them committing this crime. Nobody does that. I think the same logic should apply when we're talking about individuals who classify themselves as white when they practice racism. That you don't have to do this. You're choosing to go out and do this. And I think that's what it is, a conscious choice for whites to go out and do this, or you're choosing not to do anything about it, or you're complicit, however that you are. As a white person, you are a perpetrator. It should not be. I find that to be incorrect, and I think that is holding up a part of us being able to solve this problem, just thinking logically and not consistently sympathizing with racists. Does that make sense?
Oh, yeah. Well, see, what I'm not sympathizing with them, but what I'm recognizing is that a healthy human being wouldn't be like this. And so, you're talking to a social psychologist that studies race. So a healthy person wouldn't be like that. And what I do recognize is that obviously you're not born like that. But when you look at white supremacy as a verb, it's something that is action-oriented. And so when you start to carry out the practices of white supremacy, no, we can't have any sympathy for those people who commit those type of crimes against humanity. But in the process of being abused into that system, like the children who are raised in this society, even what you might think of out of ones who are trying to work hard to raise their kids in a socially just way, or to look at people as equals and things like that, they still live in a larger society that imbues upon them this kind of notion that whiteness is superior and everything else is less than that. So some type of intervention has to go on, but again, that's not my focus.
Right.
My focus is how white supremacy damages the minds of black people, and particularly black children.
Wow.
And what I mean by that is that you have still black people thinking less of themselves than they do other people, particularly white people, because of this society.
Context of white supremacy. Switching gears a little bit, can you talk about your concept of racial battle fatigue, what that is, how that applies to the topic of white supremacy?
Yeah, it's really a good segue because racial battle fatigue is a psychological and physiological stress response to what I would call a specific race-related relationship between a larger racialized society and racially marginalized individuals or groups, and how they interact with that society. So this is a taxing or the exceeding of one's resources that endangers their well-being. So it's kind of a disturbed person, environment, racial relationship, and it's mediated in part by our racial socialization or coping. But what happens is when you really think about when I talked about a healthy human being, a black person is not, or a person of color, wasn't meant to live in a society that's based on white supremacy. And they weren't meant to have to function and being treated as less than on a day-to-day basis. So we have to understand that racism is a violent act, and that violent act carries out some kind of response to the body. And what that response is a psychological response. So you can start having self-doubt. You can start believing that you weren't meant to work in a certain position because of whatever reason that you're going to give to that, like, oh, I'm not as good as, but you are. So the other part is a physiological response: headaches, night terrors, stomach aches, going into work, and you know that office is filled with people who don't like you because you're black or a person of color. And you have to feed your babies, and you show up to work, and you have a physiological response. So that's the physiological response to racial battle fatigue. You have a psychological, physiological, emotional, behavioral. So when all that is put together, that's how we understand how racial battle fatigue is a cost on people of color and living in a racist society. So, for instance, just think about, because you asked me if I was black. Are you black?
Yes, sir.
All right. You ever been pulled over by the police?
Unfortunately, yes, sir.
Unfairly? For something that you didn't do?
I have been, in my view, unjustly stopped, detained by enforcement officials many times where I was not doing anything criminal.
All right. So let me ask you this. When you were pulled over and those lights went off and everything like that, did you feel like going out dancing that night?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not.
Did you feel like whatever your favorite meal is, did you feel like eating at that moment?
Absolutely not.
Right? You didn't feel amorous towards your significant other, did you?
No, sir.
So this is a physiological, psychological response. So when you measure that over a lifetime of black men and other people of color, that the cost is that, particularly for black men, is your a cost to your lifespan. That it takes off years of your life having to deal with race-related stress, racial macroaggressions, microaggressions, however you want to phrase it. But it all is a consequence of racial battle fatigue in a racist society.
Great comprehensive explanation. In fact, if you really want to get context, I'm in Washington State now, but I lived in California previously. I was stopped walking within like a half-mile radius of my residence so many times that I stopped walking in my own neighborhood just because I was stopped so many times. I just said, forget it. It's not even worth it to go out and walk. Now, that is pitiful.
And that's a rejection of your humanity, see? And that's what's not normal. You're normally supposed to be able to just walk and enjoy life and feel free. But as a black man, when have you ever had that experience where you can say, I feel free? I feel human, 100% human. Because you're reminded every day that you're not, at least in the eyes of other people. And then it has consequences to you because you have to react to it. Even if you have the greatest self-pride in the world and the greatest self-esteem, the fact that you have to respond to other people's interpretation of your humanity, your dignity, and then they have the power in many respects to take away your life. My son, my youngest son, was trying to blow off steam after the election results was coming in, and so he's like, I'm going to 24-hour fitness to work out. And my first reaction was like, no, because it could have been some white vigilantes out there who saying, yeah, Trump empowered us, now we can just take it out on this black boy. That's not how black people are supposed to live. In fear of that their child can't come home because either a cop or some vigilante group will act their will upon you. And like I said, I'm from Chicago. I worry about my family and friends all the time. And I'm not talking about those isolated populations where we have high crime rates. I'm talking about outside of that.
Wow. That is the system of racism, white supremacy. And I know Dr. Frances Cress Welsing, always enjoy invoking her name. She was a guest on this program 31 times. She said that black people do not qualify for mental health as long as the system of white supremacy exists. I think your theory of racial battle fatigue goes a long way to explain that. The question I wanted to ask, though, does it impact racial battle fatigue? Is that impacted when we see images like Sandra Bland or Sam DuBose? They just had the hung jury this past couple of days in Ohio. This was they had the video footage of him being shot and killed on camera in Ohio about a year ago or so. All of these different police encounters and what have you, seeing the images on TV, that has an impact. But like if you compare that with, say, Roots, the re-imaging that came out this summer, or 12 Years a Slave, or Nate Parker's The Birth of a Nation, right? These are dramas. This is not, real footage of black people, but it's still showing the same type of thing. Does that have an impact in terms of racial battle fatigue? Does that impact how black?
It sure does. And just the fact that you could share a story to me, if we were sitting in your home and you were telling me about how your day went and how you were walking and the police stopped you, it's transferable because, one, you're my brother, and I understand it because I've been there, right? So it's transferable, so I can receive that kind of pain. But the promising thing is with social support networks, we can try to reduce that. We can't eliminate racial battle fatigue, but we can reduce it because we can't get rid of racism, right? Or white supremacy. It'll never die. Well, if I invoke Derek Bell, he says he couldn't see a time where racism would disappear. So it is transferable, and it is something that if somebody reports about something or we see something, your racial battle fatigue can go up. We can just look at, we can walk, well, you've seen some of the day one after Trump or something that's been kind of going all across the internet. And when you see a swastika or a nigger put on a building or a car, you can look at that and your racial battle fatigue goes up. It's almost, if I were to draw an analogy, it's almost like blood pressure. You have an immediate response to some kind of external force, something that's going on that automatically changes your body chemistry and makes you respond to that negative force. And so when we look at some good work out there, that even with black men and with college degrees and high income who live in white suburban communities have a higher rate of morbidity than any other group. And not from police killing them. These are brothers whose blood pressure goes up. These are brothers whose stress level go up. And it's going up because they are disproportionately targeted and made to feel less than because they have to constantly endure a racist system. Then they take that into work. And then, they might have worked there for years and are being looked at funny, like, why are you here? I see somebody lurking in a building that doesn't belong here. I knew a professor from UCLA that was carrying his computer to his car, and campus police surrounded him. And he was a distinguished professor.
Not distinguished
Chester
enough,
Pierce,
apparently.
I don't know if... say that again?
I said not distinguished enough, apparently.
Exactly. Because what did Malcolm X say? A black man who teaches at Harvard, right? What is he called?
Nigger.
Okay. And I knew one, and not a nigger, but I knew a black male whose work I was influenced by is Chester Pierce. And Dr. Pierce told me, now he was a distinguished professor. He's the one that coined the phrase racial microaggression. And he was about to give a distinguished lecture. And they had the audacity to ask him to set up the chairs in the auditorium.
Wow. That is wow. That is the system of racism, white supremacy. Regardless of how many degrees you have or any other attainments of certification or competence, you are still seen as a nigger. Do you have recommendations, things like recognizing this is a widespread problem, like things that black people can do to kind of manage their mental health, and they realize that they are suffering from racial battle fatigue? What can they do to try to offset that?
Well, one of the best things to offset it is to have a strong social support network. And what that means specifically is you have to have someone in your group, or people within your group, your inner circle, that you don't have to explain this to get affirmation, to second guess what you went through. They already know that white supremacy is worldwide, and it has a particular form here in the U.S. So that social support group is very valuable to reducing racial battle fatigue. The other things is that we can do are to be able to predict that things will happen. We have to be students of history so that we can understand. I think that's what Dr. Chris Welsing was somebody who understood history and was able to look at history or contemporary data in the context with history. So then she was able to predict a Trump election, where other people thought she might have been crazy, getting old, and this sister from the South Side of Chicago, what's going on with her? But she was able to predict that because she knew how whites tended to vote, and when you start sending out those messages about white nationalism, code word for white supremacy, they respond. So what you have to do is to be able to predict your environment too. So you're not put in a place where you're going to be at shock with what happened. The other thing that you could do is have transference, and I'm not talking about going out beating up anybody, but you need some positive transference, whether it's working out, whether it's going dancing, whether it's hiking, biking, whatever. You have to do things that puts your mind and body in a positive atmosphere that you can get re-energized. And so we have to do that more and more as we go through the day. The other things, obviously, you have to prepare like it's a 12-round fight. You got to exercise and eat right.
Wow.
So we have to be healthy. We have to, at any point in our lives, we need now more than ever that we have to be healthy people.
Great suggestions on dealing with that. What do you have a view on consumption of cannabis as a means of? I mean, so I'm in Washington State. It's legal here. It was just legalized in California. Does that count as something to help combat racial battle fatigue?
Brother, I want to do a study on that. Would you be a participant in that study?
I might be willing to help out. On that.
I believe that would be one of the easiest studies I could get participants for. But I do believe I'm not a cannabis smoker or someone who uses cannabis oil yet. I probably should. But I definitely believe that there are benefits to it from all the research that I've read. I do believe that there's something to say that it could reduce our stress load some. And so I think there are benefits. I don't know fully what that might mean for racial battle fatigue, but I do think that that's something that would be worthy of study.
Okay. I suspect some of our listeners might be willing to participate as well. So if you are flooded with any queries about this study, and if you need any help, Cal's listeners, I'm sure some of them, they got you covered. Dr. Smith.
I wouldn't even have to pay them instead of being a participant, right?
We got it. We got you covered. No problem. And legal here, too. We have a lot of listeners that are on the West Coast now where it's all legal. One of our listeners, they wanted to know, I don't know if you have been involved with like the hiring process at the University of Utah or any of your other faculty stops along the way, but if you have been involved with the hiring process, have you observed any differences in how black males are treated in comparison to black females? I'm sorry?
Okay, you broke up a little bit. So you said the hiring. Have I been in a hiring process? And then I didn't hear you, but something about black male and female?
Right. I said, I don't know if you've been involved with the hiring process, but if you have you observed any differences in how black males are treated compared to black females in the hiring process, since you do a lot of work around black misandry?
Well, yes. And part of it is that there's a couple ways I can answer that. One, I'm seeing fewer and fewer black males who are making the short list to be interviewed at universities. All right, so that's one thing. But I also recognize that part of our problem goes back all the way to elementary school. So if you look at the data, you'll see that there's more black girls who will graduate from elementary school than black boys. There are more black girls who will graduate from high school and on time than black boys. There are more black young women who will major in almost every major from 2 to 10 times the rate as young black males do. There are more black females who go on to grad school now than black males. There are more that go on to get their PhD. So we're seeing that black women are having greater successes at almost every stage of the academic and professional ladder, at least in higher ed, than black males are. So I'm not surprised that we are not seeing as many black males, particularly assistant professors, in these pools. So it's part of the problem of the whole pipeline, which then gets back to, I believe, white supremacy, racism, all that, as you defined it, and the attack on black boys. So they're being taken out of the picture much sooner, and they are losing hope in the educational system, and then they feed into the prison industrial complex. So it is a place for them. It's just not the place that we want them to be. We're seeing more brothers get GEDs and college degrees in prison. Well, I shouldn't say that, but we are seeing more GEDs from black males in prison than we ever had before, because more black males are in there. Now, there are not more who are in there than there are in college between the ages of 18 and 24. It's been a misnomer to say that in the past when we knew better than that. But there is now the second way of answering that question, I do believe that on many college campuses, black men are still seen as a threat to the racial order of academic departments. That does not mean that black women aren't, but I just believe from all the survey data that we have, good survey data that we have, black men are still seen as more of a threat to the racial order. And that might just mean, that doesn't mean even having more than one black woman on faculty, right? But we're not going to have two.
Wow. So, I have been to Utah before. Unless I'm mistaken, it's not like there are tons of black people hanging out in Utah looking for staff positions at your institute anyway. But point well taken.
Let me say this, because we are having this. I have a joint appointment in ethnic studies, and we have a position open for in African American studies, and it's looking at masculinities, gender. And we have over 55 applicants, and we actually have a very good pool of males in there. Now, we don't always know if those are black males and black females, but we have a very good pool of black males. And also, the history of Utah is much different than what people think it is. You had freed slaves or enslaved people who had come to Utah. You had free who never had been enslaved who had come here. Then you had the gold rush that brought some here, and you also had the military and railroads. So you have had black people in the valley, Salt Lake Valley, much longer, even before it was a state. So, for instance, our largest black Baptist church here is Calvary Baptist Church, 124 years old. That's 4 years older than statehood.
Wow. I do remember, I'm not a buff on Utah history, but I do remember the kerfuffle, I believe at Dixie State College, about the name change where they became a university and they didn't want it to be called Dixie. And I think they even played Dixie at the university, and it was a big kerfuffle because some of the black students said that they associate Dixie with racism, and then they had to talk about the history of black people in the state. It was a big to-do at the Dixie, I think it's now Dixie State University up in Utah, where I think this was in like 2013, within the last 2-3 years. But yeah, that is a fascinating history of black people in the state of Utah. Wow, that was one of our listeners' questions who wrote in. We'd had people that called as well, but I just wanted to ask really quick about the report that you co-authored with Dr. Curry. We spoke with him about it, as I told listeners at the beginning of the program last month. The full title, "You Make Me Want to Holler and Throw Up Both My Hands, Campus Culture, Black Misandric, Microaggressions, and Racial Battle Fatigue." Really, really interesting report, and you even highlighted some of the aspects of the study already. This is one portion that I did want to make sure that I read. You all write, yet the racism, particularly against black males, runs deep and is symptomatic of black racial misandry. Black racial misandry as an exaggerated pathological aversion toward black boys and men created and strengthened in societal, institutional, and individual ideologies and practices. Black racial misandry is an ideological pathology similar to but distinct from black racial misogyny that is reinforced in scholarly ontologies, axiologies, and epistemologies, as a result of which black men are held in suspicion, marginalized, hated, rendered invisible, treated with decreased empathy, and put under increased surveillance, or placed in one or more socially acceptable stereotypical categories. This is all talking about being in historically white environments, colleges, universities, where some of these socially acceptable stereotypes are: you must be an athlete if you got in, or you must have got in on affirmative action because you couldn't possibly be smart enough to have qualified for this university on your own. Why did your study specifically focus on black males?
Well, I was actually, obviously I'm a black male. I have black sons. I have a black daughter, black wife, but I had to do this because I felt like black males' voices weren't being heard, and heard in a way that it wasn't coming out of some kind of pathological examination, whether it was done by black males, scholars, or black female scholars. Even if we look at gangster rap, when you really boil it down, and I do this in my class all the time, everybody will say, yeah, it's misogynistic, it objectifies women, and they'll run down the whole list. Nobody will say what it does to black males. It's a very small part of hip-hop, right? The way we look at hip-hop culture has all kind of facets to it, from dancing to artistic forms of hip-hop culture, visual artists. But nobody says that the gangster rap is a racially misandric description of what black males are. So when people use gangster rap in this negative forms to not the sociological ways in which some gangster rappers really break down the racist society, but I'm talking about the negative forms of it, they never say what it does to black males and the imagination of all people, black and other, and why some people see that as a kind of negative stereotype to justify the exploitation or extermination of black males. So I pretty much had to do it, and I used to write on multiracial issues, and then black issues, but then I said, we have a lot of people doing great work on black women, and I actually have a study out right now that's on focus on black college women and the issues of racial battle fatigue that they have to deal with, but I took time to really focus on black males for some years just so you can have some work out there that I feel is good, that can stimulate conversation and also inspire other people to do work. So with the study that Curry and I did together, what we found was that black males were considered among four stereotypes that were existing on these college campuses. One is the criminal predator stereotype, and Hillary Clinton basically talked about that and the way she looked at black males when she called them super predators. And this is what people on college campuses are looking at black males as a criminal predator type of stereotype. They also look at them as maintaining this kind of ghetto-specific type of stereotype. And when I say ghetto-specific, what I mean by that is that people see this as a deficit, pathological, ghetto, cultural position, that they possess a weak work ethic, a tendency toward violence. They come from fatherless homes, and they have no positive male role model. And so all of that they feel is played out in this kind of gangster rap narrative. Another stereotype is being a non-student athlete stereotype. So if you are there, you better be an athlete, but you're not a real student, so you kind of have this backhanded compliment where, we praise you for being an athlete, but you're not that intelligent. But then most of these students weren't athletes, right? So then they fall into this, well, why are you here? Which is kind of the next stereotype, as this where they feel like there's no sense of belonging for black males. That you shouldn't be on this college campus taking up a space for someone else unless you're here to perform. So we have to realize how this all operates in this whole white racial solidarity perception of what it means to be a black male.
You all touch on specifically within the report, you all being yourself, Dr. Curry, your co-authors, you all touch on the fact that people consistently, they think that, hey, Donald Trump and, black males, rappers, benefit from patriarchy. This is a sexist, a male-dominated society, so black males would also benefit from that. And you all have some pushback within the report on that. You all write, white patriarchy fails black men. The gendered sexual racism black males the gendered sexual racism black males experience actually distorts the various values and powers often attributed to white masculinity. As political theorist and former COWS guest, Dr. Tommy J. Curry explains, the black male is not born a patriarchal male. He is raced and sexed peculiarly, conjured as barbaric and savage, imagined to be a violent animal, not a human being. His mere existence ignites the negrophobia, taken to be the agreed upon justification for his death. The physical death of black men and boys is the desired result of white patriarchy as it maintains the racist social order of the United States. This racist order depends on black male corpses because black male death lessens their economic competition with, as well as their political radicality against white society. Anything you want to add to that section, Dr. Smith?
Dr. Curry is brilliant, ain't he?
For sure.
That brother, man, he's an awesome brother. I love that brother.
Many of our listeners do as well.
Yeah, and that study benefited immensely from his insight. And I mean, we have a kindred spirit in the way we look at these issues, and it was very good for me to have a brother like Dr. Curry assisting in this project, because we were able to push each other and try to come out with something that we feel belongs in the academic conversation. And if we don't have these serious conversations about what it means to be a black male in this society and some of the failings of other scholarships and how they looked at black males, then the only thing that will continue to happen is black males will suffer. And what you will find is the desensitizing of others, and I'm talking about everybody in this way, is very global. They're desensitized about how black males are treated and where they belong and where they shouldn't be. So when they don't show up on college campuses, nobody sheds a tear. Because the sad reality, even among some blacks, is that they don't belong there. They are where they belong, in jail, on the streets, getting their hustle on, rapping, trying to cut a record or a CD or whatever they call it now. So that's where they belong, but they don't belong in college. So when they see the prison rate increase, nobody sheds a tear. When the state below you, couple below you, was when California admitted only about 22 black male students in their freshman class of non-student athletes. Nobody shed a tear. They didn't say this is outrageous. Where are the black males? Why aren't they being admitted? Right? I mean, obviously there was some, but it wasn't a national outcry. What's going on with UCLA? That's the sensitivity that Dr. Curry is trying to push, that you need to cry for black males just like you would cry for anybody else who is being damaged in their educational outcomes and their personal life and any other place where you're trying to just seek the madness of being human. That's all they want. That's all we want, is to be human. Whatever that means. And we know in the context of this world, we're not talking about being white. We're just talking about before whiteness ever, when we were back in Africa and having great societies, as Carter G. Woodson talked about, as W.E.B. Du Bois wrote about in his dissertation, as John Henrik Clarke talked about, John G. Jackson wrote about. There was a time when we felt human. So that's what I believe Dr. Curry's contribution to the academic community is, and that's what the contribution of this paper is, to push back on folks who want to push back on black males and say that they benefit from something. I want to see, what do we benefit from?
We've had...
You tell me every indicator, I don't care what it is. Where do we benefit the most?
The pushback I think we've heard from some listeners is that black males benefit sexually in terms of access to sexual partners, that black males benefit in some way because just being a male, at least having physical muscle mass, that you can be physically intimidating in certain settings, so people will leave you alone or might even, accommodate you quicker in getting things done that you want if you're a black male. That people are so impressed by black males, particularly now with seeing us on television and what have you, that they look for black males to set standards for certain things. I think those are some of the things I've heard in terms of how black people benefit from patriarchy, male dominance. Any of that seem logical to you?
Well, there's logic to a lot of things. I don't have to always agree with it.
Okay. Well, I guess, how would you respond to someone who said, well, I disagree. I think, Dr. Smith, I think black males, yes, they're victims of racism, but they also benefit from patriarchy, and that, you're discounting different ways that black males benefit, like some of the things that I listed already.
Well, I mean, there's one thing to say that someone benefits, and there's also another way to look at it as being pawn in a larger system of white supremacy. And what I mean by that is that just like at some of these historically white institutions, you'll see black women, brown women, other women of color in certain positions, and you would think that they have arrived, that they have an advantage, when we know that the larger system still has its hand on top of their head. And I'm not suggesting that people aren't doing what they want to do, but I think we need to ask a few more serious questions about what does it really mean to benefit in a white supremacist society. So, like one of your examples was muscle mass and being big. I'm a 6'3", 6'3" tall man, black man, 250 pounds, right? Former college football player, although that was decades behind me now. And you know what that muscle mass still gets me? Just happened today. The fear in eyes of white people. A colleague of mine who I've known for years. And I even said something to her so she knew I was behind her, turned around, and then that gets you shot. Is that what I want? Muscle mass to get me shot? Are you kidding me? When we look at the death rates, mortality, morbidity rates of all racial gender groups, and we see that black men are among the very lowest, where does patriarchy benefit us then? Where does patriarchy benefit us in academic achievement? Where does patriarchy benefit? I mean, when we talk about a global system of white patriarchal supremacy, like the system that Bell Hooks talks about, those are the type of questions we have to have better interpretation of reality. Not just your politics, but reality based upon the data. I understand your feelings, but I'm a researcher. I look at the data.
Context of White Supremacy. Dr. Curry, he encouraged that I ask, what sort of pushback do you get? You just stated that you are a person, as a researcher, you respect data, evidence. What does the data say? What has been the response when you go back with the data about how black misandry, anti-black racism, how it impacts black males specifically? What is the response? Is there enthusiasm and let's publish and let's talk about, get more people concerned about these issues?
Well, there's obviously some pushback, but I think coming out of this election and seeing what who voted the way they voted, we're going to get pushed back more in other areas, and they're going to look at some of Curry's work and say, I didn't like what he said, but that man was right. And so but as he would say, you rejected me because of your identity politics, your personal politics, not because what I said wasn't right. So, yes, there's pushback on these things. And some people feel like black males are getting too much attention. I'm like, well, what kind of attention? And is it good attention? And if it's good attention, what does that really mean? So we have to ask very serious questions. So just like I said about the bad part of gangster rap, when nobody, and I dare you to find me the article, because if you do, I will use it, but it will only be one of very, very few that have been written that shows how on one side they're saying how gangster rap is bad for black women because it treats them the ways I talked about. But none of the studies talks about what it does in the eyes and minds of people when they think about black males. If a police officer is quick to draw his or her gun on you, than he is or she is on anybody else, it's because they've been conditioned to do that. That doesn't protect you from patriarchy. Patriarchy can work its white patriarchy can work its magic on all groups of people to make them look like they benefit when they really not benefiting.
I guess the example that I think is more frequently cited, even though it's kind of morbid, is that when you have instances of police terrorism where they kill a black person or a non-white person, that black males get a lot more attention, and when these sort of things happen to black females, they do not get the attention. Does that qualify?
I'm sure you asked Dr. Curry that question, right?
For sure.
And he gave you a very sophisticated but easy answer. And he told you, and he probably told you, because I know he's told me many times, because I don't have the numbers right on me, but I believe it's well over that black males are getting killed at a rate 100 times to 1 of black women. Not that the death of one black woman shouldn't be important. I'm not saying that. The death of any person unjustly taken is important. But when you have this type of slaughtering of black males, that's when you need to say something. And you say it with the intent of trying to change a system that disproportionately attacks a group of people. So if 100 homes were blowing up in one community and only one in another one, you need to find out what's going on that's making these homes blow up. Is there some electrical type of problem going on? Is it the power wires above these homes? That's where you want to focus a lot of your attention. You might be able to help that one house. But my point is I think Dr. Curry would say, is that the numbers are appropriately given attention to what happens in the deaths of black males versus anybody else. So it's not like they're disproportionately getting attention. The deaths of black males are disproportionate.
He did break that down. I was trying to remember his response, and it was with the passion and conviction of someone who has confronted that response repeatedly and just already has the ammunition right there, the data and evidence to back up that this is not even a logical comparison that's being brought out. Before I get our callers, the last question I was going to ask was, you had a paper that you gave, The Audacity of Hopelessness, Black Men and Mundane Extreme Environmental Stress. This was a paper you gave to the Association of Black Sociologists. What was the substance of this paper presentation?
All right. Now, give me the title on that one again.
The Audacity of Hopelessness, Black Men and Mundane Extreme Environmental Stress.
Okay, so with that paper, what we were looking at is kind of how the environment impacts, much like on college campuses, but in a larger community, impacts black males, and how their hopelessness is increased with their age. And it's not hopelessness in themselves, but it's hopelessness in society. So black people and black males in particular have high hope when they're young because they're taught that, hey, you can be whatever you want to be in many of these families. You can achieve your dreams, but a lot of the families aren't telling them about what W.B. Du Bois talked about, is this kind of bicultural identity. So you're black, you're African, but you're African in America. And so you have to love yourself, but also understand the racial context in which you live. If you don't have both understandings, then you are going to not succeed academically, and you're not going to be healthy mentally. So what happened with some of these older black men is they like, well, I have a reality of what racism is like. I know that it's not going to be fair out there. So they lose hope as they get older, but they have lower racial battle fatigue. Because when you have high hope and the outcomes don't match what your hope is, then you're stressed at a higher level. And then once you start understanding that racism is part and parcel to your condition in America, you start losing hope in the system. And then you start diverting that kind of attention to other measures. So now I understand the game that I'm playing in. Before I might not have understood it. I understand the game that I'm playing in. I've lost hope in your system, but now I can play this game that I know I can succeed in when I know the rules. So they might start doing other things. They divert attention to different situations to be successful. So that's kind of the essence of that paper, is coming to terms with white supremacy in the U.S.
That is fascinating. I know for listeners, President Barack Obama, one of the books that he authored, The Audacity of Hope, kind of play, kind of subtle reference on that title, I think. And then in terms of the way you interpreted what you actually are getting at in the presentation, where you start out with all this hope, and then as kind of white supremacy just slowly crushes you each and every day, the daily insults and terrorism and the accumulation of racial battle fatigue, your hope goes down as you can incur more damage under the system of white supremacy. That is fascinating. Folks who dialed in, if you have a question you would like to ask Dr. William Smith, feel free. The number to dial 641-715-3640. The code 564-943#. Press *6 if you have a question. Thomas in New York, did you have a question for Dr. Smith? You should be with us.
Hey, good evening, Gus. Good evening to Dr. Smith. Can I be heard?
Yes, sir.
Good evening, my brother.
Good evening to you. I'm Thomas Smith, so you might be related somehow. I had 3 questions. Hopefully I can get all 3 in. And quick comment for you was your son was a lot safer going to the gym in that Hillary loss than the Trump loss. I guarantee that. Is there a lot of interracial dating and it's a lot of interracial relationships in Utah?
Well, yeah, it is. Much like Minnesota, when you have smaller populations of black folks around, that tends to be a byproduct of the demographics.
Okay. I'm glad you're familiar with Dr. Welson's work, and you know about genetic annihilation. And you also, I'm sure, you mentioned Trump getting a huge percentage of the white vote. Therefore, is it safe, or should I say racial fatigue, to assume that all white people are racist?
Okay, I missed part of that question. Just the last part, can you restate that?
Is it safe? You also coined the phrase, I think, racial fatigue. Do you think
racial battle fatigue?
The racial battle fatigue, to assume that all white people are racist?
Well, I think we kind of addressed that earlier in the call, and I like the definition that Gus had shared with us earlier. That I think that if you look at the conditions of how we exist in the U.S. and how that is just twin cousins or twin siblings to white racial supremacy, all people are a product of that, and so therefore white folks have struggled internally with racism from the day that they were born. So it's something that they have to deal with, and they have to try to exorcise ostracized, just like black people have to have racial socialization not to go crazy in a white racist society.
My question was, is it safe to assume that all white people are racist? But I get your answer. My last question for you, sir. You talk about the white male patriarchal system.
Mm-hmm.
Where do you put white women inside of that system? And that's my last question. Thank you for taking my call, Gus.
So I put white women right along with white men. And I think that's part of the problem, that if we're going to, I said I'm a researcher, so if we're going to do good research, we can't give them a pass because they're white women. We have to analyze the data and be able to say, all right, here is where white women are complicit with white men, sometimes even more so. So I think with this, at least from the exit polls from this election, we see that. And those are some of the hard questions about what an ally means that people are going to have to deal with. So it's very important that nobody, especially when it comes to black people, gets a pass.
Awesome. Appreciate that, Thomas in New York. The caller at 2045. 2045. Did you have a question for Dr. Smith? Last four digits, 2045. Did you have a question, or are you just listening?
Yes, greetings, Gus, and greetings, Doc.
Greetings.
How are you? I just had a prelude to my question. I've noticed a shift, a paradigm shift as far as the role in the household, as far as the matriarch, the woman being able to have more opportunities in the workplace to make money and so forth. Even though the man may be more skilled, and I think that may be kind of an emasculation type of thing. But my question is, you talk about the college experience and everything, and the education, but do you promote, actual trades, learning? Because I know many graduates that end up in hundreds of thousands of dollars of debt and are just as destitute as, the regular person. Mm-hmm. But, do you advocate that as well? And my last point is, when you speak of the woman, the black woman, do you have any stats on, I live in the Midwest, and black women, Latino women, the incarceration rate has skyrocketed for them as well. So, do you have any data on that, or do you study any of that data? And that was my only question. Thank you for taking my call.
Okay, so the second question was on the skyrocketing numbers of black and Latino women. And the first question was on, help me, Gus, on that one.
I think he had a statement about emasculation and changing work opportunities for white women. Right. And then he had, was there a question, or was that it?
No, not white women, black women. You can have a black woman and a black man in a household. Mm-hmm. However, the black man can be much more skilled than her. However, she will obtain more opportunities to be the matriarch, to be the head of the household, so to say.
Oh, okay. Well,
versus the man.
Yeah, that's right. Now, with that one, I'm not sure that is the case. That the fact that a black woman has more education or even more income emasculates a man. And so if that is the case, then we need to do a better job of raising our boys into manhood. So if your point is that a man should be the primary breadwinner and the person with the most education, then, that's not reality in a lot of ways.
I apologize, and I don't mean it. I'm so sorry to cut you off, sir, but I was actually saying that the man nowadays, I'm just basically saying, like, I know plenty of people within, immediate people that I know with the black male is much more qualified and many more skills. The black male,
okay,
but his black wife gets more opportunities.
But that's been our history, right? If you look at coming from the South to the North, black families follow black girls to places where they can get an education. So that's been part of our history if we really, study our history. So going to Ohio, where black women were allowed to go to a college or university, black families would leave because the black boys or black men could find either factory or field work. So we've always had black women who look like they were in greater numbers in certain places in education than were black males. So that's been part of our history. So if you put it in that context, then we can understand that we had to do whatever we could do as a family to survive. Now, I think your other point is that with a black male who has more skills than a black woman and he still can't get a job, that's also been part of our reality. So that brother who can't get a job has to deal with still the fear of a black man being in a position and what they think about how we keep and suppress a black family down by not letting him live up to his abilities and accumulate wealth and opportunities for his family. So black families have not been able to accumulate the same kind of wealth and opportunities as white families have because of white supremacy. Now, I hope that helps to answer that question.
The prison,
yes,
I think
sir.
that was the other one, the skyrocketing rates of prison for black females. Did you have any data on that or research?
Well, no, I don't have any data. I've just only read on some of that, and I think you're right that black women and Latinas are increasing in arrest rates, nowhere near black men and Latino men. So it's not even a comparison on the numbers that I've seen recently, but it's still increasing in numbers that we haven't seen before. And what from what I've gathered, is that black women and Latinas are being arrested for things that they used to not be arrested for, even if they were stopped for it. So sometimes what was going on is they may have been stopped for a crime, whether they committed it or not, and still would not get arrested or convicted, right? So now we don't see that same kind of compassion or whatever. It's not compassion when you're just stopping somebody to stop them. But what we are seeing is that this racist society doesn't care if you are a black male or black female. They're going to arrest you.
Appreciate
or
it.
even thank you. I'm going to mute my line. Thank you very much, Doctor. And thank you, Gus.
For sure. The caller 4789. 4789. Did you have a question for Dr. Smith?
Yes, Dr. Smith. I was wondering, because I volunteered as a teacher at a sort of, what do they call it, inner city school, and I was trying to help the young boys. I think they were like second grade to like read, and first grade, but they had a lot of issues both in school and out of the school, and they would fight. But I realized that one of the major issues was that they were embarrassed that they couldn't read like the other students, and that's when like they would get frustrated and really get violent. I was wondering how I could get them, if that situation, they get embarrassed when if they can't, to realize that that's not that big of an issue, that they can learn to read, and that to sort of calm them down when they get embarrassed of they can't do what other students are doing. And I have another quick question after that. Thank you.
Okay, and you said you're from where?
This was in D.C.
In D.C. Well, I know in D.C. and New York City, there are some, I don't know the name of them, but there's some really good literacy programs, culturally appropriate kind of literacy programs that they have. Some of them are actually sponsored by some of the black male fraternities. I know Omega Psi Phi out in California, Tall chapter is doing an excellent job with its program with black boys. It's 22 years in existence, and this year they serve over 800 black boys, 250 black mothers, and about 200 black fathers. So if I were you, I would look out for some of these kind of literacy programs that are culturally appropriate, that can work with these young people, with people who look like them. Because one of the things that they will do is they tend to respond a little better with somebody who looks like them and might have a similar history. And what was your second question?
Thank you for that. My second question is, I was wondering, do you know when in the growth of black males, do they realize that they're not really men in the society, and how do they react? Has your research looked into that?
I personally haven't, but there was a couple studies that were done, some excellent work. One is race in the classroom, and then there was another, the 3 R's by Joe Fagan, and he had a co-author with that. But they looked as early as preschool in one of the studies, and kindergarten, and that they saw that these children had a sophisticated understanding of what race meant and who was seen as less than. And they treated those young people accordingly to what they were socialized to believe about other racial groups. And the ones that they felt the most animus toward were the black kids in the schoolroom and on the playground. So they would force them to be in certain areas where they wouldn't play with them. And so this was a year-long ethnographic study that was done in these schools, just monitoring what was going on. And obviously, if there was, the kids were put in physical danger of, getting beat up or hit with something, that they would intercede. But other than that, they pretty much watched what was going on in these preschool and kindergarten classrooms and on the playground and things like that. And so these children understood what it meant to be black, or how black kids were viewed, how Mexican kids were viewed, how Asian kids were viewed. So race is learned early on.
Thank you.
Thank you for the questions. Roz, did you have a question for Dr. Smith? You should be with us.
Greetings. Can I be heard?
Yes, sir.
Greetings to you, Gus, and greetings to you, Dr. Smith. This is a great conversation. I have 2 questions for you. The first one would be, what role would you say the propagation of homosexual activity and behavior as normal plays in the genocide of black people?
Well, that's outside of my research area, so I couldn't offer a good answer on that one.
Okay, no problem. My second question would be, what role would you say homeschooling, as far as for black people, would play in preventing racial battle fatigue in regards to the propagation of homosexuality in schools, as far as them now teaching this stuff to elementary school age children as if this is normal behavior? Thank you. Thank you so much, and I'll mute my line.
Okay, so I think the question that I can answer is, I'll try to answer, I should say, would homeschooling help reduce racial battle fatigue for young school-age children? And I believe that it would be a protective factor on one hand, but you have to have the understanding that children will still go out in the larger society at some point. So you can keep them away from harmful environments, but you can't always protect them from harmful environments if you don't equip them with strong racial socialization where they know how to use adaptive coping strategies. So what I mean by that is if you keep them home, you teach your son or daughter whatever it is that you want them to learn to be very astute young people. What happens when they go out and they go to high school if you don't homeschool? Or what happens once they're finished with their formal homeschooling and they're out in the large society? Something should have taken place between birth and before they get out into the larger society on their own that you help them with so they can navigate a racist world. If you don't do that, you're basically setting your child up for traumatic experiences.
That answer your question, sir?
Yes, it does. Yes, it does. And I totally agree with you in regards to even if you do choose to homeschool them, you have to prepare them by teaching them about racism, I think, as early as possible, and just giving them insight, I think, directly from, like, the news, things that happen to young children every day so they understand that as black children, there's dangers to being a black child as well as incidents that happen to adults and others. So thanks again for your insight.
Yeah, and I would say that you have to do it age-appropriate ways. You have to find how to handle those tough conversations in age-appropriate ways for young people. You don't want to do more damage by trying to, what you might think, to protect them and to teach them, but then you elicit all kind of fear of the larger world, and then they never want to leave your home or go outside. And so there's ways in which you can do that. There's all kind of great scholarship out there that would be helpful.
Right on. Appreciate that. I think one of your colleagues, one of our former guests, Dr. Darren Smith, might be listening into the program. You familiar with Dr. Darren Smith's work? I know he's written quite a bit on the Mormon religion and racism, white supremacy, and how it still practices there. You're familiar with his scholarship?
Darren was one of my students.
Oh, right. More than familiar.
Yeah, he's a sharp brother.
For sure. Kudos. He's listening in. I'm sure he's appreciating hearing your insight this evening. The caller, retired firefighter in Florida. Did you have a question for Dr. Smith?
Yes, sir. Greetings to everyone. Greetings, Dr. Smith. My question, and I hope I'm on topic, because I tuned in late. When or if the non-white black collective get disillusioned and or frustrated with the electoral process, what do you think the constructive results would be, or alternatives that we would do in order to move forward from a constructive point of view?
Yeah, we talked about that, but let me answer it in a different way this time. One of the things I like to recognize that how I was influenced throughout my life, and that I'm only a byproduct of people who have come before me and have influenced me intellectually. So with that said, I got to know Kwame Ture pretty personally before he died. And one of the things that I admired about him is that he said that we have to organize.
That's him.
And so he said organization is going to be the key to black emancipation. So, he would always talk about you have to have a plan for tomorrow. You can't just go out and demonstrate without a plan. A real revolutionary has a plan for tomorrow. And so I think in planning for tomorrow, we have to all be part of organizations. If there's not an organization out there that you like, that feels that it meets the needs that you want to see accomplished, create one. Because I'm sure there'll be like-minded individuals who will join that organization, and you could be powerful and make an impact in the lives of other black people. So I personally adopt Turean philosophy, and that would mean that we as black people, as African people, have to organize. And if you're not in an organization, then you might be wasting time, because then you're just pontificating and you might be blowing smoke. So I think the greatest use of our time is to be part of an organization.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
All right.
Appreciate that. We had a person, they wrote a question in, our caller in Michigan. Who do you think is most confused about racism, what it is, and how it works? Do you think white people are most confused, or do you think non-white people are most confused about what racism is, how it works?
Well, I have no data on that, and I said I'm a researcher, so I like to be driven by data. Now, my opinion is something different, and my opinion is that I think everybody is confused, but confused about different things, and have different different levels of confusion. So some might say that voting over 80% for Hillary Clinton is a sign of confusion, right? Putting almost all your votes in one hat is a sign of confusion. Some might say to be shocked that Donald Trump won is a clear sign of confusion. Now, black people were shocked. White people were shocked. Latinas were shocked. Asians were shocked. So I'm not sure who's most confused. But again, my primary focus is on black people. And we cannot risk being confused about anything. There's, like I said earlier, there's enough data. We have enough history behind us. There's enough books that have been written. Libraries are still open. If you can't go to a library for whatever reason, if you've got internet, YouTube is a valuable source. You can see all the people that I had to drive all over the country to hear speak right on YouTube. And you can run down that list to be informed, because a lot of the things that people like Dr. John Henry Clark used to say, or Dr. Francis Quest Welsing used to say, are on YouTube right now, and you can analyze it to the nth degree. And you can use that as a guidepost for how you look at the world that we live in. So I'm not sure how I can answer that other than saying that everybody is confused. And so black people are confused when we don't use these resources. And then we can't predict what might happen, and we're caught off guard. We have enough evidence not to be caught off guard. So I don't have an answer for that. That's the answer.
Right on. A different person wrote in. They said they heard about your concern and discussion about the psychological well-being of black people. He wanted to know, are you familiar with the work of Dr. Bobby E. Wright, his concept of menticide? And do you think his scholarship would be helpful on us solving this problem?
Yeah, but so since we're talking about racial battle fatigue, I wanted to make sure that we had a clear understanding about that. But his work and other works, that's what I was referring to if we get back to those positive aspects of the 60s and the late 60s and the early mid-70s and the Black Power movement, when you had places like Third World Press that had books that would be publishing all these. John Henry Clark wrote a nice book that came out of there, and I think Wright also had something published through Third World Press. We have to start having our young people read these works, and then so they can be equipped, not just young, but everybody. If you talk about book clubs, if you're black and you're in a book club, you should be reading these works and discussing them. Now, what does that mean for African people in the U.S. in this type of post-Obama society?
Rhetorical question. Love it. Love it. Love it. Dr. Curry, I didn't want to take up your entire evening, but Dr. Curry, he did share a question to ask, a few actually. One of the questions he said would be good to get your thoughts on. What are your thoughts on Dr. Curry's work on the rape of black males, men and boys, and their oppression, and in particularly, I know we always think in a historical context in terms of frequently we think in a historical context in terms of the rape of black females during the plantation era of slavery, and how that continues, the legacy of that, and continuing in various ways. Dr. Curry often reminds us that black males were also raped on the plantation, and that legacy continues as well today, even in 2016. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, Dr. Curry and I were at a conference recently and on black males. And I said to the audience before he spoke that Dr. Curry's intellectual imagination is beyond the grasp of most people. And I was very serious. I wasn't just using flowery or flattering language to appeal to my brother. I knew about the rape of black males. We know about Mandingo and all these other things, but Dr. Curry has clear data, clear evidence. He's been able to unearth other documents that helps to make his point about how black males are victimized. Now, my background is also in counseling psychology, and it was on my specialization was in rape, incest, and abuse, other forms of abuse. Obviously, I didn't stay in that direction in my long-term career, but one of the things that I knew then, and I'm much clearer now, but many students, obviously, when I was teaching back in Illinois, when I taught at Western Illinois University in African American Studies, my classes for the first 3/4 of my career there was primarily black, just like 98% black students. So I got to teach almost every student black student that came through that campus, because I taught 3 classes a semester. Some were like 50 plus students in each class. So what I came to realize is that many black young men would come to my office with these kind of traumatic experiences and share that with me and ask what could they do, what should they do. So I knew that it was much more prevalent than we knew about. In my counseling psych background, the coursework that I took, not one mentioning of this, not even a mention of males in general being raped by women, but definitely not black males. So with Curry's examination, I think it is a clear indication of where there is a gap, and he's the right type of person to fill that hole, and because he's going to fill it with intellectual and academic rigor that it should deserve, and he's well equipped for the pushback that he gets for why are you bringing this up. But then when you see what happens in the lives of grown men who are victims of that type of stuff, then you realize that somebody needs to have that clarion call to draw attention to those traumatic experiences. But it's easy for us to demonize particularly black men who rape black girls or black women, and it's harder for us to imagine that it's happening to young black boys. I have a friend, a personal friend, who shared that with me, and I know how that plays out in his life as an adult. So, it is something that needs to be addressed.
Context of white supremacy. Before we wrap, just since we have talked a lot about black mental health and your concept of racial battle fatigue, we've had many black people through the years who've called into the program, and they've talked about being stressed and the trauma of white supremacy, and they look for some sort of counseling to go see a mental health professional. The problem they will run into a lot of times is that they end up going to talk to a white therapist, and that white person practices racism in a variety of ways, sometimes just saying that, well, racism isn't that big a problem, or we're not here to talk about racism, so they are not allowed to bring that into their mental health plan or processing their problems. And even this has happened sometimes, people have stated, when they get a black mental health professional. Just can you talk about the challenges that it represents? Because I hear frequently people talk about black people being resistant to going to get mental health treatment, but I don't hear that aspect of it being brought out, that it can be very difficult as a black person going to get mental health treatment in a system of white supremacy.
Well, I think you kind of answered that question, because I totally agree with you. It is a problem, and when you have a system that doesn't recognize that racism exists, or the people who don't really believe that racism is bad or as powerful as you say it is, and then they take that attitude into a counseling session, they're ill-equipped to be able to treat you. Now, I am obviously a proponent of mental health treatment, and I believe that all people who, whether they feel they need it or don't, many who don't think they need it really do. And so I think you should seek those things out. And I believe that places like the Association of Black Psychologists, which is an incredible organization of some beautiful scholars and practitioners, is a place that you can look towards or look to get recommendations for your local area where you can have an African-centered therapist. And then you have the Association of Black Psychiatrists, not as Afrocentric or African-centered as Association of Black Psychologists tend to be, but still are some very good practitioners. So I would look there first to get those recommendations from organizations like that for the places that you live, because I do believe that you need to, even if you have we got to go back to, Carter G. Woodson, who talked about a black person trained at Harvard sometimes could be as damning as a white teacher in a classroom. So we have to understand that not all black people are good for you, right? So they might come in there with stereotypes themselves. So you have to, just like you wouldn't I hope you wouldn't just go out and buy any car that somebody says has good tires, good engine, and everything else. Just believe me, you wouldn't do that. So why would you do that with somebody who's supposed to be a mental health practitioner? You want to do your research, make sure that they are the type of person that will be beneficial for you, not only in a mental health capacity, but in a culturally appropriate and African-centered perspective that understands racism and the cost of racism. So Association of Black Psychologists and Association of Black Psychiatrists are places that you can go for referrals.
Awesome. Definitely appreciate that. For our listeners, if you want to get more information, you can go to the faculty page at the University of Utah for Dr. William Smith. Check out more of his research on racial battle fatigue, some of his other scholarship on racism, white supremacy in general. A hoot having you on the program. Dr. Curry, he strongly encouraged us to speak with you. He was super excited. We were having you on the program this evening. And then Dr. Darren Smith, who has been a guest on this program more than once before, when he saw that you were on the program, he was messaging as well. His enthusiasm. Was glad to hear you on the broadcast this evening. So we really appreciate you taking time out to share some of your views. Hopefully we can have you back to continue the dialogue and particularly give some more suggestions in terms of things we can do to manage our black mental health. But really enjoyed hearing from you. Dr. Smith, continue your outstanding research. Stay safe out there in Utah. My experience didn't seem like there was a whole lot of black folks out there. So, man, you have my sympathies. Stay as safe as you can. And we will really look forward to having you back on the program. Speak with us soon, sir.
Well, I really appreciate it. And just to be able to have at least a little corner of a time to talk to you after you've had great people like Dr. Darren Smith and Dr. Curry and then Dr. Francis Cress Welsing. I mean, for me to come on your show is a real pleasure because all of those are soldiers in the battlefield. So I appreciate the time that you gave me to at least share my research. And just to let your listeners know, I'm about to have 75 black folks over my house this Saturday. So
wow.
Yes. So there's a lot of black people, more than what people would imagine being in Utah. So
I think that sounds like Mia Love, and you all imported some folks from Colorado. But
no Mia Love now. No
Right
yes,
on,
sir.
Right on. Love to Congresswoman Mia Love as well. Dr. William Smith, University of Utah. Thoroughly appreciate. I hope you have a grand time this weekend. As I said, keep up the outstanding work, and we definitely will make more time to have you back on the program to continue the conversation, Dr. Smith.
I appreciate it.
For sure. Enjoy the rest of your Monday evening, sir.
Okay, you too, man.
Yes, sir.
All right.
Context of White Supremacy, Utah's Dr. William Smith. Fascinating. Shout to Dr. Tommy Curry for the recommendation. You can hear him referencing Dr. Smith during our last broadcast when he was with us. And then also Dr. Darren Smith. He was on the program a couple times before. I was even remembering when he was with us the last time, I believe that was 2013, where he was talking about some of the research that showed that just being in contact with whites can have adverse health consequences for black people. I think some of our listeners that really resonated with their experience with individuals who classify themselves as white. Folks have any comments that they want to get in based on what they heard on the broadcast, we can certainly make time for that. I did want to just take a few moments to address a couple quick things. Number one, we will be here. I think anyone who's been listening to the cows for any length of time, we generally do not take like holidays or vacations, right? So we generally broadcast on what is known as Thanksgiving, which is coming up next week, Christmas, New Year's Day, like whatever the general big, holidays tend to be, we generally tend to broadcast on those. So we will be here next Thursday. We're keeping our typical Thursday routine, which is workplace racism. So that is going to be real interesting for next Thursday. You do whatever you do for the people who are participating in all of the rituals associated with so-called Thanksgiving. And then we can put all that away and get down to business of workplace racism, since we won't be on the plantation that day. But before we get to all of that, we will have Paul Ifeanyi Grant will be on the program early next Thursday. He is a black scholar, author. He's been on the program numerous times before. We heard from him when the rioting happened in London in 2011 after the shooting death of Mark Duggan. We've talked about some of his numerous books before, books on economics, global understanding of racism, white supremacy, things black people can and should be doing to try to solve this problem. He writes regularly, right, about racism. He wrote an article back in May, we'll say, sometime in the summer. He wrote an article, and it was a point that he was making was that black people in the States, some black people in the States, have not been doing the correct thing to try to solve the problem of racism, and consequently deserve Trump to be president. And I've talked about that before, that term deserve, and when I hear it applied to black people consistently, it's always something bad. Black people deserving something bad because we've been shiftless or, inattentive, unresponsive, whatever the reason is. We haven't done the correct thing, so we deserve whatever bad is happening to us. He's done a lot of constructive work, and I always enjoy having him on the program, but I did want to ask him about that. I do think that could be a little bit of anti-blackness, particularly from someone who doesn't even live in this hemisphere. But it will be a hoot to have him on the program, and also to get an international perspective on racism, white supremacy. But that'll be early in the day next Thursday, so we're doing double duty for Thanksgiving Day. We'll have the early broadcast. Mr. Paul Ifeanyi Grant, he'll be with us at 1 p.m. Eastern, 12 noon Central, and 10 a.m. Pacific next Thursday. I'm quivering because I hate early programs, and so now not only will we have two programs, we'll have a cotton picking early program next Thursday, which is terrible, but that'll be cool to hear from Mr. Grant, and then we'll do workplace racism. So that's Thursday. We'll be on a good chunk of the day for next Thursday. Tune in. We can be constructive for the so-called holiday. The stakes, certainly for anyone upset about the election, or if there are black people who are more concerned about racism, well, then we should be more focused and serious about how we allocate our time. That's number one. Number two, I had been hearing black people and even some C.O.W.S listeners. I would hope nobody that listens to the C.O.W.S like on a regular basis is like concerned, shook up, stressed about the election, surprised you were not, shocked about all of this, given the conversation that we've had over the last year, Dr. Welsing's prediction, and even others, Dr. Tommy Curry, when he was on in May, saying he thought Trump was going to be successful. He would be the next president based on his understanding of racism. But for people who don't listen regularly to the C.O.W.S, maybe they listen once every other month. That's about as much of Gus as they can tolerate. Or people maybe that are newer listeners who are surprised or confused and processing all of this. I have seen black people saying that they think that there's some sort of major conflict, right, between whites, that they're having some sort of, intense brouhaha around the election of Donald Trump, and this is going to be, some sort of, savage conflict. We might even have whites shedding white blood around all of this, and that's not my view at all. Not even close. I think the major point that I cannot emphasize enough, the system of white supremacy is primarily operated and maintained through deception. Whites lie a lot. If you've seen the C.O.W.S group page, it says white lies matter. In processing everything around Donald Trump, whites have been spectacularly deceptive around all of this. I don't care what you have to say. I don't care how many Hillary Clinton buttons you have, or Bernie Sanders buttons, or Gary Johnson buttons, or whatever. Dr. Jill Stein, I don't care what you're talking about. I don't care if you're saying that you hate Donald Trump and you're moving to Canada and not your president and I'm still with Hillary Clinton, or whatever else you have to say. I suspect that your primary commitment is to the system of racism, white supremacy, regardless of who you voted for. And I'm not going to think that you're not racist. I'm not going to think that you're an ally. I'm not going to think that you are about social justice just because you are whining and crying, or even out in the street breaking windows about Donald Trump. I would just encourage us not to get confused, sidetracked, distracted about that at all. Do not think just because there are some whites who are saying that they are upset about Trump being in office, do not think for 5 seconds that they're not racist. And even if whites are having some sort of argument about all of this, at the end of the day, counter-racist logic to me would dictate the white people who wanted Donald Trump to be president, they are more powerful right now, and things have worked out the way that they wanted. That's what counter-racist logic dictates to me, and that whites are just going to go along with that script. I don't see any apparatus in place right now to remove him from office or to keep him from taking the White House once January 20th rolls around. So I would not get concerned. I would not invest too much time and energy watching all of that and thinking this is any sort of major brouhaha. If anything, I would say the evidence that we have in hand, we have just witnessed white political racial harmony in an unprecedented level. You have never seen whites come out to coalesce and vote around one candidate like they did in this election. To me, that does not signal any sort of white racial strife or anxiety. To me, it signals that whites are on the same page. They're coordinated. They are just going down their plan. I could be in error, but just the bottom line, all that, do not get caught up confused about these white protesters. I've seen whites protest about any and everything over the past 5 years. I've seen them protesting with Occupy Wall Street, with Michael Brown, with Eric Garner, with the Seahawks winning the Super Bowl, with the Seahawks winning Sunday Night Football. I posted about that last night. They were letting off fireworks and running around acting a fool last week just because they won a regular season game. I've seen whites do that. Remember the Pumpkin Fest last year? It was right after they had some of the major police shootings where they had whites. They were out in some rural area. They were fighting and breaking glass and injuring people just for no reason. I've seen whites riot on the campus of Penn State when Jerry Sandusky was arrested and they fired Joe Paterno. They were flipping over vehicles and what have you. Whites will riot at the drop of a pancake. Do not get distracted, sidetracked, confused. Certainly do not be thinking that these are whites who are not racist and are trying to ally with niggers in getting rid of Trump. Certainly do not allow your imagination to run that wild. Moving forward, number 3. I had a sound clip I wanted to play, but before I play that, I did just want to make sure that I said something about Dave Chappelle. I think many people at least saw or knew that he was going to be hosting Saturday Night Live this week. They were making a big to-do, that this was the first show after the election, and so that was going to be a big topic of conversation. He did an opening monologue, about 11 minutes, where he talked about racism and having suspicions that Trump would win because of his understanding of what it means to be white. He didn't say it that way, but it was pretty close. I thought that I didn't see the whole episode, right? I saw his opening monologue, which was interesting, maybe even worth being dissected. They did a skit about election night and being with a bunch of Hillary Clinton supporters and seeing Trump win. They did obviously other skits. The skit that stood out to me the most in a disturbing manner, Saturday Night Live has a long history of racism, white supremacy. This is the show that had Eddie Murphy on years ago as buckwheat just to ridicule and despise black people. Same type of content, in my opinion, when they had Chris Rock on. Leslie Jones, they had her on when she did the sketch, kind of, in my view, mocking slavery. Just lots of issues, right, with this program. They didn't even have black females on the show up until very recently. Leslie Jones was recently added to the cast. But they did a skit with Dave Chappelle and like 3, maybe 4 other actors, most of them white. I think there was one other black actor in addition to Dave Chappelle. But in the skit, Dave Chappelle is like 43. He lives at home with his mother, and they're watching football. His black mother comes out, who is Leslie Jones, the victim of a lot of white supremacy terrorism online through this year. She was in Ghostbusters, right? She had it happen a few times where they stole some of her private information too, right? So they have Leslie Jones. She comes out. She literally breastfeeds Dave Chappelle. Talk about emasculation. The caller mentioned that before. She literally breastfeeds Dave Chappelle. And so all of his other friends, they're watching football. All of the other guys, they're just looking like, what is going on? You're a 43-year-old man, quote unquote, being breastfed by your black mother. And so one of the times she just gushes like milk all over his face, and he's like, it's tasty, it's great, it's delicious. What are you talking about? And I just thought, wow, like we couldn't get him in a dress, but we can certainly still emasculate him and just make him a little child being breastfed. It was stunning. I couldn't even finish watching the sketch just because I was I had not heard anyone commenting about the sketches that were on Saturday Night Live or Dave Chappelle's performance. I hadn't heard anyone saying anything about what took place or doing a breakdown, so I was just kind of seeing it all the first time. But it was quite surprising. I think this is one of his few times being on mainstream television since he left the Chappelle Show on Comedy Central and infamously made the comments on the Oprah Winfrey Show about not wanting to wear a dress and feeling like black males are being emasculated, to go from that to then fast forward to 2016 and having him on the first Saturday Night Live after the election of Donald Trump, and he's being breastfed. Even, in fact, if I can get my Welsing moment, what does she say in the ISIS papers? You have the classifications of people are man, woman, girl, boy, baby. The system of white supremacy disqualifies man for black males, so you can pick from what is left. You don't want to pick woman? Fine. Have a pacifier and a rattler. I had an audio clip. I will pause here if folks have commentary on what they heard from Dr. William Smith, or I guess I mentioned at least 3 things, so if you have commentary on that as well, you can feel free. I would be particularly curious if anyone did see Dave Chappelle on Saturday Night Live, where that sketch specifically, which is rather traumatizing. I didn't see that till today. If I had seen it earlier, I would have posted that sketch for people to watch. But if you have commentary on what you heard from Dr. William Smith, feel free to chime in. If you have commentary on what I shared before, the 3 points I just made, you can feel free to chime in on that as well. If not, I have my quick audio segment that I will get in and we can wrap things up. Any of the folks who dialed in who have a hand up, did you all have commentary you wanted to share? If folks are satisfied, that is wonderful as well. I can prop my feet up and enjoy my evening. Everybody is folks satisfied, or folks have any commentary on what they heard from Dr. Smith or any of the points that I touched on? Saturday Night Live, Dave Chappelle, the protesters being a part of the distraction of racism, white supremacy. Any commentary, or are folks good?
Can I be heard?
Can I be heard?
I heard both of you. We'll do Roz first.
All right. Thank you, Gus, for taking my call. Yeah, I wanted to say, and I think I said this previously, it might have been on the compensatory call-in, but I said I truly believe that this is on the grandest scale I've ever seen, it's the greatest expression of rhetorical ethics, like practiced on like a massive nationwide scale. And that's what I see all of these protests and all of these white people in the street and with their placards and signs and their stupid chants. All of it's nonsense. And what you said earlier is what I agree with as well, because I think I also said it too. The more powerful white people won the day, and the less powerful white people are going to kowtow and fall in line where they're supposed to, or white people will show them better than I can tell them that they will be made to understand they're not behaving in the proper manner according to the more powerful white people. So definitely I agree with you on that. the Dave Chappelle skit, I did not see that one because I didn't get to see the show either. But I saw a skit of him doing The Walking Dead. He played Negan. He played about 5 different characters. Like, it was Negan, and then basically all the characters he's played throughout the show. The crackhead character, the Clayton Bigsby, the pimp that's always making all of those characters were basically the people who Negan had to choose from to see who he was going to hit in the head, and he chose the crackhead. And at the end, the crackhead made a comment about politics and grabbed his head and ran. So that was a skit I saw. I didn't see this one, but now I really want to see that one because I'm just shocked because, like you said, when you brought up the fact that he talked about not wanting to wear a dress and not wanting to be emasculated, and it's like they found a way to get him to agree to, perform this skit in which he's being breastfed, which is just tacky, trashy, and trifling. And I just think we just haven't really learned from the past. We just haven't really learned from those sorts of ways that white people psychologically manipulate us in order to get us to do things to our own detriment, and then they'll end up blaming us for whatever we've been coaxed into doing, to serve whatever the system of white supremacy, whatever purpose they wanted to serve. And in reference to Dr. Smith, I thought he was a great guest. I would love to have him back on. I didn't know that he. Well, now I know even more because he kept saying that he is a man who's into to statistics and getting into research and getting hard critical information before speaking on a particular subject. So I wish he was able to answer my first question. I think he basically answered the second one really well. And I would just like to hear more of his perspective in regards to just his thoughts and ideas about racism itself. And that's pretty much all I have to say. Thank you, and I'll mute my line.
Right on. The other male caller who spoke up, did you have commentary you wanted to get in?
Thanks, Gus. I think this was a really great show. I think what I took away from it was that the earlier the better that I guess people start talking about racism to their children. It seems like starts right after they're born or while they're still in the womb, but especially once they go to school.
I can't hear you.
Sorry, can you hear me?
I guess if you could speak up, just enunciate lots of black self-respect as you enunciate your views.
Okay, sorry. I was just saying that I thought that the show was really good, and I thought that what I took away from it was that the earlier the better that black people start talking about racism to their children. That's what I took away from today's show. And that what you were just talking about, Dave Chappelle and the breastfeeding and whatnot, it reminded me of the guest that you had on. I think she came on for a really short period, maybe 30 minutes or something like that. And she wrote a book, and there was a breastfeeding scene on it, where a white female was breastfeeding on a black female. It was very weird and very but yeah, that's the thought that came to my mind, and how I feel I haven't seen it yet, but from your description, it sounds so disgusting and in so many ways that only white people could come up with such a thing. So, thank you.
Can I be heard?
Yes, sir.
I wanted to. I enjoyed the guest. He's a very intelligent man, but we are still learning. But I went to trade school in Utah. I went to lithography bookbindery school in Utah, and I'm telling you, the Mormon temples they have are more like the White House. They have bodyguards. They have, excuse the background noise. My wife's coming home. They have, you can't find a piece of trash or anything on the lawn. It's immaculate, and they're very respected. So there's no, so-called black affluent neighborhoods out there, nothing like that. But I was just interested in how when I asked him the question, as far as, instead of pushing young black men to go jump and run and get scholarships to go to these big schools and become, either you have to run or you have to go in debt by thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars. What about a trade? Something you can learn with your hands that nobody can take from you. And he totally skirted around that question. And as well, I thought he was a superior data analysis, and he had no data as far as the prison population that's growing in the African American community, and that just kind of took me aback a little bit. But peace to you, Gus, man. Good show. To all the callers, peace, my brother Ross. Love you. Peace.
Right on. Appreciate the input. Appreciate that. Any other commentary folks wanted to get in on what they heard from Dr. Smith, or any other points that were brought up? Everybody satisfied? I will assume folks are good. Again, make sure I recognize the passing of Gwen Ifill. I'm sure a lot of folks saw her different news reports, PBS and other outlets, her written in broadcast format over the years. Black journalists, it has been an unpleasant year on the whole, but specifically black journalists. But we will have more information included on her work, the significance of her body of work this weekend on the compensatory call-in. But black journalists, super important. If everybody is satisfied, I had one clip just talking about one of the appointments to Donald Trump's cabinet over, I guess, this past weekend, what have you, as they've started to fill out which people will have positions in the Trump administration, kicking off on January 20th. Stephen Bannon, this is a white male. He right now is one of the top executives that runs the site Breitbart. This is what they call a conservative website. He got one of the significant staff positions as a part of the Trump White House, and that stuck out to me immediately because I'm very familiar with Breitbart. Not that I don't go to the site to read their articles or to click and share their content, but I see the type of things that they talk about. And specifically, I think Breitbart first came to my attention with Shirley Sherrod back in, I think it was 2010. She had a federal position, part of the Obama administration. Breitbart leaked a story and they took it out of context. Melissa Harris Perry, I had the whole audio laid out, but I was pausing because it's a little lengthier because it's actually two audio segments together, but I was delaying to see if folks had commentary they wanted to share. But Melissa Harris Perry, she did a great interview with Shirley Sherrod in 2012. So this is 2 years after she had to step down, and they talked about her book and some of her experience with her. In fact, that was the whole reason I made the sound clip. I'll play the sound clip and we'll end there. But this is one of the things that stood out as we kind of see the beginnings of what the Trump cabinet, Trump administration will look like. This is the first clip, kind of giving some background information on who Mr. Bannon is and some of the work that he's done at Breitbart. And then the second clip is Melissa Harris Perry and Shirley Sherrod. It's one I know a lot of people had questions or didn't necessarily agree with all of Melissa Harris Perry's views, but she did talking about black journalists, she did do some really quality work at times, and this is one that I thought was a really great piece. It doesn't mean that I agree with everything, it just means that I think some very insightful points are made that you can learn a lot from the second clip. And I think you'll get further information as to why this program is titled Context of White Supremacy. But the first clip is NPR. They're talking about Mr. Bannon, his role in the Trump cabinet. And the second clip is Melissa Harris Perry from 2012 talking with Shirley Sherrod and her experience with Breitbart. This is the Context of White Supremacy. We'll be right back. Get ready to wrap things up once the sound clip concludes.
Donald Trump has richly rewarded his campaign's CEO, Steve Bannon, with an appointment as chief White House strategist. That appointment has inspired a firestorm. Bannon's critics say his right-wing news site, Breitbart, spreads hate and bigotry, as NPR media correspondent David Folkenflik reports. And just a note, this story has language that some listeners might find offensive.
Steve Bannon's resume is packed with seeming non sequiturs. A stint in the Navy, a stretch at Goldman Sachs. He's a Hollywood investor who made a fortune off Seinfeld reruns. And then there's the one drawing all the controversy. Bannon's time turning the right-wing site Breitbart, in his own words, into the platform of the so-called alt-right, with headlines and stories that offend many African Americans, Latinos, Muslims, and women. Kurt Bardella was the site's top public relations consultant for 3 years. I asked him what he made of the criticism that the site published offensive and racist stories.
I thought they were all completely valid and all true.
There were headlines such as, "Birth control makes women unattractive and crazy." Gabby Giffords, the gun control movement's human shield. And "There's no hiring bias against women in tech, they just suck at interviews." Bardella argued Bannon sought to incite Breitbart's more bigoted readers, generating more clicks and shares, more controversy, and more pressure on Republicans to take nationalist stands.
You look to the top for direction, for boundaries, and when there aren't any, it empowers everybody beneath you to double down and do that to the nth degree, and then that's what really happened.
Bannon became Breitbart's executive chairman after the death of the site's founder, Andrew Breitbart, and he moved the site's headquarters from Southern California to Washington, D.C. Bannon had earlier expressed the desire for a shift in conservative politics.
What we need to do is bitch slap the Republican Party and get those guys, heaving too. And if we have to, we'll take it over.
That from a conservative radio show in 2010. On the same program a year later, Bannon denigrated liberal feminists with an anti-lesbian slur, praising instead such conservatives as Michelle Bachmann and Sarah Palin.
The women that would lead this country would be feminist, they would be pro-family, they would have husbands, they would love their children. They wouldn't be a bunch of dykes that came from the seven sister schools up in New England.
The new Breitbart under Bannon took flight from the primary defeat of House Majority Leader Eric Cantor by an anti-immigration economist and the resignation of House Speaker John Boehner. According to Joel Pollack, Bannon emphasized original reporting and expanded the site's staff. Pollack is senior editor-at-large and general counsel of the site.
Breitbart News is a conservative website, and we're not racist, we're not anti-Semitic, we're not anti-gay, we're not anti-woman, we're not any of those things.
Pollack says Bannon is inclusive in his hiring.
Well, I am an Orthodox Jew, and I have Saturdays off, Jewish holidays off, and Steve Bannon always wishes me a Shabbat Shalom on Friday afternoon, for the record, just in case you were concerned about that.
The accusation of anti-Semitism is a sensitive one. Breitbart adopts a hawkish line in favor of Israel, and incendiary Jewish conservative writer David Horowitz once wrote a piece calling the conservative editor William Kristol a renegade Jew. During a custody battle, Bannon's former wife accused him of making a series of anti-Semitic remarks in arguing over their daughter's schooling. He has denied making those comments. In 1996, Bannon's then-wife said he had physically attacked her. Bannon pleaded not guilty, and the case was dismissed. The moment had an echo earlier this year when then-Trump campaign manager Corey Lewandowski forcibly grabbed a Breitbart reporter to prevent her from approaching Trump after a rally. Breitbart essentially backed Lewandowski's denials over its own reporter, though those denials were untrue. Kurt Bardella was among those who soon quit, calling Trump a demagogue.
Breitbart evolved to become the propaganda arm, a de facto super PAC of the Trump campaign. And I think that was very evident if you looked at the homepage every day.
Outsider no more. Breitbart can now serve as a voice reflective of the Bannon wing of the new Trump coalition, and, if desired, an enforcer too. David Folkenflik, NPR News.
July 2010 is probably the first time you heard the name Shirley Sherrod, and at that time, she was the USDA's Georgia State Director for Rural Development and the latest target of the late right-wing blogger Andrew Breitbart's attacks. Breitbart pushed out a deceptively edited portion of Sherrod's speech to the NAACP in Douglas, Georgia, including this portion where Sherrod is telling a story about being asked for help from a white farmer.
I'm struggling with the fact that so many black people have lost their farmland, and here I was faced with having to
If you didn't know any better, and if you haven't bothered to listen to the entire address, Sherrod appears to be promoting a discriminatory agenda. But the clip was taken out of context.
Context.
Looking at behavior in context.
Context. And edited in a way to misrepresent the message. Here's the problem. Far too many people who should have known better and should have taken the time to listen to her entire speech turned on her. The administration hastily repudiated her and asked for her resignation. And the NAACP issued a statement that sought to shame and embarrass her. The irony? July 2010 should not have been the first time that you or the administration or the NAACP had heard her name. She and her husband, Charles Sherrod, are stalwart civil rights activists who worked tirelessly to integrate rural Georgia. They continue to be advocates for economic justice for people of all races. Sherrod's lifelong commitment to activism is told in her new book, The Courage to Hope, How I Stood Up to the Politics of Fear. And I'm pleased to welcome her to my table. Shirley Sherrod, thank you for being here.
Thank you.
I have been convinced from the moment that this happened that your vilification has to do with our lack of historical memory. My best girlfriend is a historian of the civil rights movement, and she called immediately and was like, I wonder if she's any relation to Charles Sherrod. It just felt like if you've done Eyes on the Prize 101, it should have created an immediate suspicion of that tape. Why do you think we've lost so much of the civil rights history?
Well, I think part of the problem is that we failed to teach that history to our young people. We failed to teach our history. It was hurtful to us, the things we experienced during segregation and Jim Crow. So we tried to shield our children, and in shielding them, we didn't teach them.
I've also wondered if part of it is because when we think of the civil rights movement, we think of the urban parts, the water fountains and the buses, but not the rural story?
Right. Well, people didn't pay much attention to rural, but that's where there were battles in the cities, but some of the real battles took place in the rural area. We didn't have the protection many of the people in the city had.
Talk to me about what the Albany movement was.
Well, my movement, I've worked in the Albany movement in later years, but mine was Baker County. Yeah. And Baker County was where we had a particularly hard time because of the person who was in charge there. And that person was the sheriff,
Sheriff Gator.
Yes. Yeah, so we had to maneuver to try to live and not run into the law, which was the Gator. He ruled everyone and everything.
When you talk about the painful things that many in your generation did not pass on to many in my generation, and therefore mine to the next, one of them that was very painful to read in your book was about your father's murder.
Yes.
It occurs in a dispute, a dispute with a neighboring white farmer. You write that your father finally said, I don't want to keep arguing with you. We'll go to court and they'll settle it. That he turned and began to walk away, and that Mr. Hall pulled up his rifle and shot him in the back.
Yes. I didn't see. We've heard it was my father turned and the bullet went in the front, but the fact was he was shooting him when he was walking away, and to this day, other than the fact that my father stood up to him, we don't understand why.
And Mr. Hall was never brought to justice for this crime?
Never. The grand jury, which was all white, refused to indict him.
And so 2 pages later, you say, I tried not to feel hate, but hate seemed the only emotion available toward the man who killed my daddy. But my mother cautioned against it, reminding us of our faith. That night I made a promise to stay in the South. Escape was no longer an option.
Right.
I understand the hate feeling like the only emotion available to the person who killed your father. It is actually harder for me to get that next move where you say, no, I'm embracing faith and I'm staying here to do the work.
Right. Well, what did I have to fight with? I could fight with trying to do good, with trying to promote love instead of hate. had it, and my mother would say to us all the time, in fact, there were some whites who talked to her in later years, younger whites, saying, "You seem to be so positive. How is it?" And I remember in particular one young white man talking to him and naming some of the whites who had burned the cross in front of our house and had done other things. And she said to him, "All of those people you named, where are they? They're dead." She said, "If I had tried to live a life of hate, I'd probably be dead too."
And so you made a choice then instead to live a life of courage and without fear.
Context of White Supremacy. Shirley Sherrod's book, The Courage to Hope, might be something we should read for the book club. She talks about the Gator and the white terrorism that marred her Georgia existence. But that's one of the first things that I thought of when I heard that Mr. Bannon and his choice appointment with the Trump administration. That's one of the first things that I thought of. Like, wow, I know Breitbart. I know how to recognize enemies of black people, and any individual who is classified as white who is associated with that website is no friend of black people. First thing that came to mind when I heard that report, and just some of the other aspects of the report. Obviously, as I've stated for years, it is amazing the number of times that the term context will be mentioned when someone goes to talk about racism, white supremacy, and particularly in that report talking about how one of the strategies of racists, the elimination of context. Very key. Also, that same kind of thread of the reconciliation that is very common. That was from MSNBC. I think many of the whites, where they can project something to a lot of people, it's consistently going to be the notion or the idea or anything that encourages black people to be about forgiving any and all sorts of terrorism. Doesn't matter if we poisoned a whole town of water for black people, or if we killed, any number of black people and kicked out a whole town of black people, or we killed your son, or we killed your whole family. We're all about forgiveness. Turn the other cheek. We will sing a song. No reparations, no repair. I know you don't have a piece of cornbread or, a pillow, but we're all about forgiveness. And we'll sing Amazing Grace, and then we'll all go home. Maybe we'll have a reunion 10 years down the road. But that is pretty consistent. But I thought that was a fascinating segment. It was actually a two-part, but I thought that was a fascinating segment for many reasons. Anywho, I will assume everyone is good. We will be here later in the week, certainly Thursday for Workplace Racism, Friday, the book club. That is installment number 4, Lathrop Stoddard, The Rising Tide of Color Against White World Supremacy. Make sure folks that are going to read the accompanying essay, the debate between Lathrop Stoddard and W.E.B. Du Bois. If you read it, we can include it in the dialogue book study as we proceed. We'll be here Saturday, the compensatory call-in, 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific, and we will be here this Sunday, our Global Sunday Talk on Racism, this coming Sunday. Early broadcast will be great to hear what our international listeners have to say about the election of Donald Trump and what the response has been in their respective parts of the globe. If you have any questions, if you're trying to find something in the archives, if you can't find a specific program, if you have a guest suggestion, if you have questions, if Gus has been talking crazy and you don't understand, or you just want additional information, feel free, drop an email, untiljustice@gmail.com. The address again, untiljustice@gmail.com. You can follow us on Twitter @untiljustice. Guest suggestions should definitely be email. That's helpful for me, just so I don't have to look everywhere. They can be in one spot, and then I have a folder so I can keep things organized. Heard that today, Kwame Ture. Organized. That's how I organize for guest suggestions, keeping them all in my Gmail account. So untiljustice@gmail.com if you have guest suggestions. Even though I chuckled, and I even appreciate some of our listeners, 1842 and others, when we were talking about racial battle fatigue and whether or not cannabis would help with addressing that. And they said, wait a minute, you participate in the study, sobriety would be best under conditions of white supremacy. Absolutely. And even I've stated consistently, I'm very aware that everybody is not going to co-sign on sobriety, at least be codified. I've stated that consistently. You do not want to be behind the wheel and have that be the time that, oh, yes, I've decided to participate in Dr. Smith's study, and so I need to consume my daily amount of cannabis now, or consume and then decide that we're going to go out and joyride through Utah, wherever we happen to be, for the next 2 hours, and then you bump into Daniel Holtzclaw, Darren Wilson, any other race soldiers. I've stated I've seen that sort of thing consistently, where we do not do sobriety, which would be best, and then we also don't have a code for consuming these narcotics, these substances, and it just ends up causing more problems. We should make every effort to make sure that our behavior at all times reflects that war is being waged against us, black people in particular, and to the best of our ability, try to make sure that our counter-racist behavior is seriously reflected at all times. Sobriety would be best under conditions of white supremacy. That said, minimum, we'll be back on Thursday. We might even be back before that. Just to state again, I think it's so immensely important, kind of looking at some of Dr. Welsing's thought process and how she came to making that prediction, not, just to keep repeating the same thing over and over again. She wasn't the only person who thought Donald Trump was going to win, but just I think it's really important, and I think you can learn a lot, because I think a lot of, the justification in terms of why she selected Donald Trump, it really gets to a lot of the core elements of her theory. So we might make time to do that. Might even invite Sabrina Johnson and some other folks to talk about Dr. Welsing's prediction being correct and how important it is, how we should include that when talking about her work and our analysis of this problem moving forward. So we'll keep you posted on date and time for that as well. That said, unless anybody had anything they need to get in 30 seconds, we are going to wrap there. Anybody have anything they need to get in 30 seconds? Are we satisfied? Yes, folks are satisfied. Thanks, everyone, tuning in. Hope it was a constructive investment of your Monday evening. Creator, we ask that you help us remain patient with other black people, victims of white supremacy. We ask that you help us remain patient with ourselves. Remind us to demonstrate the highest levels of black self-respect at all times, in all places, each and every time we are in contact with another black person. It has been time. Replace white supremacy with justice immediately. Cal signing out. Thanks all for tuning in.
Nigga, you so brainwashed.
I'm a victim, brother.
Problem. You're a victim.
I'm a victim of 400 years of conditioning.
Shut up.
The man has programmed my conditioning. Even my conditioning has been conditioned.